One of the many reasons that I like TBC over vanilla is the class design. I think class design in TBC is extremely good, and contrary to popular belief, it is actually very balanced. And that might be crazy because you look at a Warlock and it can do twice as much damage as say a Feral Druid, yet you still need both. And the thing that makes TBC more balanced is utility. This approach hasn't really been tried again. They just try to balance DPS out, make everybody do the same damage. And while I can understand that, the truth of the matter is the TBC approach to balance is good because not only it balances for classes, it balances for skill. Even in a super casual guild, you are still incentivized to take a diverse roster of every class to get the raid in an optimal state. So we are gonna talk about that and go over all the classes, and I guess I am gonna make a mock roster of what I will go for in my guild, just so you can get an idea. Now the three tanks of TBC, the Protection Paladin, the Protection Warrior and the Feral Druid, they all have a distinct identity for what they can do. The Protection Paladin is the best in AoE, the Feral Druid is the best in single target, and the Warrior is a bit of in between. Now something you may not remember from TBC is that early on in tier 4 there is a lot of fights that silence the tank, and that is a problem when you got a Paladin that can only do spells. Most of your abilities are technically a spell, and that makes it so off the bat you are forced to take at least one non-Paladin tank. You can think of fights like Maiden or fights like Curator. It's not impossible for a Paladin to tank him, but it is so much harder for no reason that you really want to get a physical tank to deal with those. But you always want to take a Paladin. It is just the best for trash, and trash is a huge part of the raid, right? So even if they suck at tanking bosses, and they don't, you would still need one prot Paladin. Now the more meta choice is to take a Feral tank because bears are tankier and they do more single target threat. A Warrior is just fine, okay? Warriors are fine. But bears, especially after they get their PvP gear, they are tanky as heck. But that doesn't mean you don't want a Warrior. And this is the important part, okay? Warrior is not the best tank, but you still need a Warrior. Now, Fury Warrior is actually not too bad. Fury Warrior is like top 3 DPS in TBC, depends on the phase. People sleep on the Fury Warrior. But even if they did terrible damage, you still need Warriors. Why? You got Thunder Armor, you gotta reduce the armor of the boss. You got Thunderclap, you gotta reduce the attack speed of the boss. And you got Demoralizing Shout, which you do not need Demoralizing Shout because you got the bear. But if you didn't have one, if you were going for a Warrior tank, for example, that also counts. And on top of that, you got a new buff in TBC, it's right here actually, the Commanding Shout. It gives you more HP to everybody, so you absolutely need a Commanding Shout in every tank group. So you will always take one Warrior, but off the bat we just took 3 classes immediately. Now in the case of Paladins, you actually need 3. Why do you need 3 Paladins? You need 1 Paladin for Blessing of Kings, you need 1 Paladin for Blessing of Salvation, and you need 1 Paladin for Blessing of either Wisdom or Might, depending if you're like a melee or a caster. That one is a little more optional, but you definitely need 1 Paladin for Salvation. Retribution Paladins are actually not very good, but they are still decent. However, we're gonna take a Holy Paladin to take care of that, and we're gonna take a Retribution into the melee group. Now Hunters. Hunters are actually very important because of misdirection. They can pull for you, just like in vanilla, but now they give threat bonus to the tank, and that threat bonus is always very important. Now we are gonna talk about Hunters. You always need at least 1 Hunter. Hunters do a lot of damage, right? They are pretty decent. They are nowhere near a Warlock, obviously, but they are pretty up there in terms of damage, especially after they get Dragon Spine Trophy, they crank. But Hunters bring a special talent, and this is right here, Expose Weakness. Every time you crit, you give attack power to everybody attacking that boss by 25% of your agility. As you guys know, Hunters have a lot of agility. If you're survival specifically, you get 15% extra agility, so you are stuck in agility up the butt. And that means you bring a lot of attack power to the raid, so you always want to take at least 1 survival Hunter. Oh, I messed up. There we go. Survival, there we go. But you actually want to take 2 Hunters, and that's because if you go Beast Mastery, you can give the party a 3% damage bonus. Now there are different schools of thought of what you should do with this. What you should do with this. You could, for example, dump him on the tanking group, and that way you can get more threat for everybody. It is inefficient to put a hunter in a caster group. 3% damage to the Warlocks would be huge, but that's something people don't do. But either way, okay, that's for the meta people to decide. Those micro adjustments are not quite my thing. But we covered druids, we covered hunters, mages. Once you are like full tier 4 gear, Arcane Mage is actually really good. You wanna take at least one for the intellect buff, obviously, but you can take two usually. They got a lot of useful stuff, Cone of Cold, Novas. There is a lot of trash management, ad management in TBC. You know, like mages are always very useful. Polymorph, of course. I don't have to explain to you guys why you need a mage. Like, whatever made mages in TBC useful is still the case, and their damage is quite decent if they are arcane. Some people like going fire, that's fine. The meta spec is arcane, they have mana issues, but they still do the most damage in almost every fight. If you want to take a fire mage, they are also fine, but I'm gonna go for 2 arcanes here just to go for like the meta, right? If you want to take a fire mage, those are also fine, but arcane is a little better. Mages got it pretty easy to get in any raid, right? And they also got a tank Gruul, you know, the first boss, Conclave, Council, whatever, the 4 ogres before Gruul. You need a mage, arcane mage, to tank that boss, because there's a debuff. They got a steal, they also got spell steal now, don't forget about that. They got a steal, a debuff, so they can become tanky enough to tank a boss, and they are a tank in that fight. So you always need one arcane mage in your guild. But yes, mages are not gonna have a hard time getting into a raid. Okay, the priest, you want at least one priest for fortitude, right? You need HP, that's pretty obvious, but one of them has to be a shadow priest, okay? Why a shadow priest? They generate a lot of mana, okay? 15% of their damage turns into mana for the guild, for the party, sorry. So they are absolutely crucial for, especially if you're going arcane mages, which are very mana hungry. You do need a shadow priest for that. But they also give a 5% spell damage buff to the entire raid, is a debuff, and they also give 10% extra shadow damage to the raid. So Warlocks get 15% more damage from a shadow priest. So they are absolutely mandatory. Warlocks are the best DPS in the game, you know that. So you should take at least one every single time. You can also take a holy priest. They are decent healers. That's pretty much it. But yes, that takes care of priests. Shamans. Ideally, you want a shaman every group because of totems. Now, enhancement shamans give more attack power to the raid. They got the improved weapon totem that gives them improved wind fury. So putting a shaman in the tanking group is not a bad idea. If you want to get more threat for the tanks, it's not terrible. However, the true power of the shaman is in restoration. Restoration is absolutely bonkers. They got Earth Shield, so you need 2 Resto Shamans at least. You can put an Earth Shield on both tanks. Earth Shield is a weird spell. It's like Lightning Shield, but it heals you, right? Like, every time you take damage, you get a chance of popping an Earth Shield, and that heals you. But in TBC, Earth Shield heals count as your healing, your own self-healing if you're a tank. So that's great, because it actually means that Earth Shield is a threat buff. People forget about that. But Earth Shield is absolutely fantastic as an ability, very mana efficient. Chain Heal is the most mana efficient heal in the game in TBC. And of course, you got Bloodlust. Now, we do not know if they're gonna rebalance Bloodlust for TBC. I hope they don't, but they might. But currently, the way Bloodlust in TBC works, you know Bloodlust, you pop it and everybody in the party gets 30% haste, 30% attack speed and casting speed. It is the best DPS cooldown in the game, right? You can actually cycle shamans through a party. Like, say you got a bunch of warlocks in one group, you can cycle shamans through that group and you can keep them on Bloodlust the entire fight. That's broken as heck. But even if you don't, even if they put a sated debuff into the game, you still need a shaman every group, so every group can have Bloodlust. That gives you a lot more flexibility. You can put, for example, an elemental shaman in the caster groups if you wanna, that's fine. Something like this. They can be enhancement, it doesn't really matter. You wanna take at least 2 Resto Shamans though, definitely. Shamans are in very high demand. in TBC. And now we gotta talk about the Warlock. Ideally, you wanna stack as many Warlocks as possible. The spec really doesn't matter, but you wanna take at least one affliction if you can for the Shadow Embrace, so you got more damage for everybody. But you wanna stack as many stinking Warlocks as you can. However, that is kinda hard because we got other problems. First of all, we need more healers. We only got 4 healers so far. We are gonna need at least one more healer, and that should be a Resto Druid, so they can keep the HOTS rolling. Resto Druids are actually pretty good in TBC. They are very fun too. If you wanna play a healer, for me it is either a Resto Druid or a Resto Shaman. Those are the two most fun classes to play. Now, as you guys know, Elemental Shamans keep the casters 3% crit and 3% hit, and spell hit is, you need a lot of spell hit as a caster, so that's actually huge. They can free up a lot of gear from that, but they can also get 3% crit from a Boomkin. And if you are a Shadow Bolt spamming Warlock, that is actually pretty big. Now, Boomkins do not scale very well, but they start off pretty strong. However, because of the 3% crit, they are a more than decent option to put on the Warlock group right here, so you can buff them even more. You could take 4 Warlocks in here and that would be fine, but nobody is gonna bat an eye if you take a Boomkin in here. That's also perfectly acceptable. That is perfectly meta. Now, you could, for example, put another Warlock in this caster group. Warlocks are not only good because their DPS is good, right? If that was the only thing, you wouldn't take 5 of them, okay? They have a lot of stuff, okay? They can banish ads, they can fear ads, and this is very important in fights like Magteridon, for example. Early on, Magteridon is quite a check. They have the best freaking AoE in the game. Seed of Corruption, when you got a couple Warlocks popping it at the same time, it is ungodly stupid damage. Seed of Corruption is stupid damage. And there is a lot of fights where you need to kill ads very quickly. That's the reason that, for example, we do not take 2 Shadow Priests, because their AoE, they do not have an AoE, period. So that sucks. Now, we should take at least one more healer. We can go for anything here. I think maybe a Restoration Shaman, so we can cycle through another Bloodlust. That's probably the play. Whichever is fine, okay? 6 healers is perfectly fine. You could even go 7 healers, but we are not gonna go 7 healers for this. You might wanna have one of the Elemental Shamans with a flex resto spec. We got dual spec in TBC now, don't forget about that. Some fights you could use a 7th healer, but you don't really need it. And then you got 2 slots in here. They are right in the melee group. If you wanna take 2 Warlocks and never talk about this again, you can, okay? This is not crazy, but you probably wanna take an Arms Warrior in this group, because Arms Warrior gives you 2% physical damage to the raid. 2% physical damage is not huge for the overall damage. A very small amount of the raid damage is physical, but 2% physical damage is 2% more threat for the tank, pretty much. So that is why you wanna take one of them probably. And you can, if you are not a jerk, okay, you could justify taking 1 rogue for exposed armor. They are only assassination. That's the only viable raiding spec in TBC. Not because their damage is actually not very good early on, just because of exposed armor. Exposed armor is just a little extra threat for the tank. Once again, it's not even for the damage of the raid, it's for the threat of the tank. I wouldn't take a combat rogue before glaives at all. It is not worth it. A completely terrible Warlock that is only pressing Shadow Bolt is gonna do more damage in pre-raid vesting slot than a full raid geared rogue. So if they do not have exposed armor, I will rather take a Warlock in blues. I am not even kidding. It sucks for them, it really does suck. So yeah, rogues are the only one, and because they got no utility, right? Exposed armor is pretty useless. It is more damage, yes, it is more damage, but you hardly have any physical damage in TBC anymore, so that takes away a lot from their value. That sucks for them. Exposed armor doesn't push off Saunders anymore. Like, you still get the full threat from Saunders because Warriors now got Devastate, so it's fine. Like, it's not gonna mess up your raid anymore. They fixed it for TBC. But yeah, if you don't wanna take a rogue, you absolutely could. You could just take another Warlock or maybe a Shaman or something like that. That's also fine. But yes, aside from the rogue, look at how colorful and vibrant and diverse this roster is. No longer we gotta take half the raiding warriors. Now, it kinda sucks that there is only 2 spots for a warrior in a meta comp, really. If you wanna take more than 2 warriors, you're kinda trolling. That's really pushing it. Their DPS is decent, but we are ending vanilla with like 40% of the players as warriors. That's why I am re-rolling myself, right? Like, I think you're gonna have a really hard time getting into a raid as a warrior, not because you suck, you don't suck, but because there is so many of them, right? It's gonna be really tough. Druids, which are the least popular class in vanilla, now they got 3 spots actually, so they are actually more popular in TBC than warriors. That's kind of funny. And you can flip-flop this a lot, guys, right? Like, if you wanna take like a Shadow Priest instead of a Boomkin, you can move this around. The main thing you gotta remember is that you wanna buff the Warlocks, you wanna give them everything they need, and if you do that, your DPS is gonna be just fine. I have even seen guilds not take a melee group and go for a bunch of Warlocks for speedrunning. That also happened before. That's really crazy, of course. But you got a lot more freedom on what you can take into the raid in TBC, and almost every spec is decent. So yeah, I am pretty excited for TBC, and this is the thing about TBC. People will never stop arguing about what is the better comp. There is so many buffs, so much utility in TBC, that it is kinda hard to fit everything in a single raid, and that's awesome. I look forward to see what you guys think about the raid composition in TBC. But overall, TBC is an approach to balance that I wish they kept going more for in the game. Not every class has to do the same amount of damage, but also they should be able to bring something into the raid that everybody wants. Subscribe, join the Discord, and thank you for watching!